This is, based on the headline numbers, this is the weirdest time ever to be cutting interest rates, because you got house prices at record highs, stock prices at record highs. The unemployment rate is historically pretty low. Those are the kind of numbers that usually tell the Fed it's time to start raising interest rates to lean against an overheating economy. But here they are cutting interest rates. Now, a couple of things are probably driving this. One is that it's an election year, and the guys in charge want to get reelected, and they're putting pressure on the Fed to cut interest rates to kind of lubricate borrowing a little bit to make things seem better than they are. Now, this is at the same time that the Fed or the government is releasing really fraudulent jobs numbers. They've been doing that for at least a year, where they report this blowout monthly jobs number. And everybody gets all excited because that means the economy's growing, but then in subsequent months, they revise that growth away. And towards the end of this year, they actually had to revise away 800,000 jobs in one fell swoop because they were so out of the range of reality. So probably the jobs number isn't nearly as strong as they just made it seem in their last report. And so basically, you got the government lying to you on a lot of different levels in order to win an election. Now, another aspect of this is that we're blundering into World War III. And it's possible that the monetary authorities in the West, because we're not the only country cutting interest rates, it's possible that they're thinking they don't want to enter a big shooting war against some other powerful country with tight money, because that increases the odds of a stock market crash turning into a really nasty recession, metastasizing into a depression, because those are kind of the stakes right now. That's what we're looking at. So cutting interest rates now, as we blunder into World War III, maybe seems sensible to these guys from a geopolitical standpoint too. So you have lots of reasons for the Fed to cut interest rates. None of them are good reasons, but at least it explains what they're doing. Now, like you said, though, they did cut interest rates, and it kind of didn't work because short-term interest rates went down. That's what the Fed can control. But they don't control long-term rates as easily, and long-term rates went up. The 10-year Treasury yield, which is the benchmark yield for basically everything, mortgages and everything else out there, that dropped to about 3.6%, and just lately it went back over 4%. So the markets aren't buying what is increasingly looking like a monetary policy scam that the government is running. So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. And, a big part of it is going to depend on how the election goes and how our multiple wars go and everything. So lots of cross currents out there. But right now, the markets seem very skeptical of Fed policy. And other things being equal, if we eliminate all the other distractions out there, when the markets stop listening to the Fed, that's basically the end of the fiat currency, fractional reserve banking, easy money, never-ending government growth and borrowing experiment that we've been trying since the 1970s. So it's really important to watch this kind of thing, because we don't know if this is it. But when it begins, in other words, when the system starts to break down because the falcons no longer hear the falconer, it'll look like the last week. So let's pay attention to that, because it could be much bigger than it seems right now.
You said that the commercial real estate market is in trouble. It still is in trouble. I think I read some headline there, Trump's assets have decreased, and I can't find it for the life of me, but I saw it. And he owns all of his buildings. He's just losing money in terms of if he sold it. This is not a negative thing on Trump. He's one of the smart real estate people. I've heard him say this. He owns his stuff outright. He doesn't have any leverage on it. But most people aren't like Donald Trump. They have a lot of leverage on it. This has gotten worse, the commercial real estate market. Am I wrong?
Yeah, Trump doesn't care about the value of his buildings. He's a social media billionaire, and he's like 80 years old, right? He doesn't need to be rich for very much longer. His kids are probably pretty concerned about the value of his buildings, though. But yeah, commercial real estate is one of those potential catalysts of the next crisis, and that's because, the very short version of this is that lots of office buildings got built in the last 10 years using very cheap money. and the assumption that occupancy rates would be like 90%. The buildings would be full, they'd be generating lots of cash flow, they wouldn't have to pay much debt back because their rates are low, money all around. None of that worked out. During the pandemic, a lot of people found out that they like working from home and they don't want to go back to the office. So office building occupancy rates have dropped dramatically, and in some places they're at catastrophically low levels, like San Francisco, where it's like 70% or something. That's bankruptcy level for an office building. And then interest rates went up, so the cheap debt on these buildings has to be refinanced at higher rates. Of course, that might be another reason why the Fed is cutting, to avoid what's happening in commercial real estate. But the net result is that a lot of office buildings are changing hands at much lower prices now, either via bankruptcy or just kind of fire sales. And that means that the paper that's related to the financing of these buildings, it has unreported losses. And a lot of that paper is with local and regional banks. So these banks have to report these losses at some point, which will spook their depositors into pulling money out of the banks, which will force the banks to sell even more underwater assets and report more losses, and so on, until you get a banking bust that the U.S. government is going to have to step in and bail out. So, and we're talking trillions of dollars here. So it's potentially a crisis that is of a magnitude that can all by itself cause a recession. And we've got so many other bubble markets out there that one thing blown up will immediately lead to a bunch of other things. So we're in very grave danger of a kind of a cascade failure of the over-leveraged financial system right now. And all we need is one catalyst. And it could be commercial real estate, could be a shooting war with Russia, could be an equities bear market, which we're overdue for, could be all kinds of things. So it's basically a wait right now to see what blows up first, and then see what that does to all the other bubbles out there. And there's a very good chance that it's incredibly ugly when it comes. So which, come to think of it, is another reason for the Fed to ease now. They've got a lot of reasons to cut interest rates because they've got so many potential crises that they're looking at. And, commercial real estate is one, but there are lots of others.
You were talking about the shrinking trust horizon, and then when we see these reports of the unmarked Black Hawk helicopters and FEMA getting in the way of relief and rescue efforts in the Tennessee and North Carolina mountains, which there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people. I think Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, he's out saying there are thousands of deaths. They're lying to you. There are that's what he says. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who was, former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So, where he's getting his information, I'll bet you, are a lot better than my sources. And but that's what he's saying, and you're saying that this is all part. This is a theme that you've had in your Substack, which is fabulous. I remember seeing this first, the shrinking trust horizon. And sure enough, you see Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes. She kind of flubbed she couldn't really say how she was going to pay for anything, and then the reporter was even saying, well, you got put in here without getting a single vote. But anyway, the shrinking trust horizon, how is that going to affect the economy and us and everything going forward?
Yeah, basically the background story on that concept is that in good times, we tend to trust the big systems like the monetary authorities and public health and the military industrial complex because we assume that they're taking good care of us because everything seems to be working. But when things don't work well and they lie about it, we stop trusting distant systems and our trust horizon. In other words, basically the geographic distance that we're willing to go out in order to trust people starts to shrink. You reach a point when everybody's lying to you, you reach a point where you only trust your city councilman and your mayor and the local farmers, and so you buy your food locally or you grow it in your garden, and you just don't put any stock in what your doctor tells you, because you stop taking the vaccinations that they tell you to take, or you stop doing the lifestyle changes, statins for high blood pressure or cholesterol and things like that. You just stop doing that because you don't trust those people anymore. And in the last few years, well, actually a little more than a few years, starting with Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, which the government used to lie us into a multi-trillion-dollar war, it's been one big lie after another. You know, in 2016, Trump-Russia collusion threw us into turmoil and turned out to be basically Hillary Clinton opposition research. You know, the Clinton campaign made that whole thing up. And then with the pandemic, there was just lie after lie after lie, which people figured out. You know, gradually, people aren't paying attention to all of this stuff. So people are figuring out they're being lied to one issue at a time. And now you've got this thing with the hurricane in North Carolina and Tennessee, where you know, the damage was catastrophic, and the government doesn't seem to be going out of its way to fix anything. You know, they sent like 4 FEMA representatives on one plane, and that was all they sent at first, and they put them in nice hotels, and et cetera, et cetera. And those guys aren't really doing anything other than block private citizens from trying to get help to their neighbors. So now you've got a whole new set of people who are watching the government screw up, either behave incompetently or corruptly, and they're learning that they can't trust the guys in charge anymore. So the trust horizon is shrinking everywhere you look, you know, whether it's people who paid attention to the pandemic or to the Iraq war or to this thing that's going on now with the hurricane damage. And they're concluding that the guys in charge just aren't working for them anymore. And so that leads to political turmoil. When you get people not trusting the people in charge, you end up with populist politicians getting a lot of votes. And Trump is a perfect example of that. You know, he showed up and he said, listen, the guys in charge are screwing you over, and I am going to get back what was stolen from you. So you're going to be whole again. And I'll take it out of the hide of the automakers and everybody else who's moving their factories overseas and et cetera, et cetera. And that resonated. And so the Republican Party has become a populist party now to take advantage of the growing mistrust that's out there. So that throws politics into turmoil, because the guys in charge right now, who are completely capable of killing their opponents, are looking at a political movement that's going to take power away from them. Because, you know, you got Trump advisors saying things like, for instance, Vivek Ramaswamy wants to fire 3/4 of federal employees. And he's out there, you know, stumping for Trump. And then RFK Jr. wants to basically take the corruption and the conflicts of interest out of healthcare, which is, you know, that's how half those guys get paid, right? And so that's terrifying. So you've got political turmoil now, complete with assassination attempts, stemming from the fact that nobody trusts the big systems anymore. And it doesn't just automatically stop. This either shifts into a new form of government run by populists and immediately starts trying to fix things, or it's stopped in nefarious ways, leading to even more people not trusting the big systems out there, and the next election being even more chaotic. So that's that's the process that we're in, and it doesn't get fixed easily. To the extent that it gets fixed at all, it gets fixed via chaos. So here we go. Prepare for a really interesting decade, because it is going to be something unlike anything we've seen in our lifetimes. Not since the Great Depression has anything like this happened.
It's going to get fixed via chaos. Oh boy. It's, well, you know, you look at it and it's the government is like you said, you know, in good times you think the government's okay, and in bad times, and now we have social media, which is, you've seen Hillary Clinton coming out and saying they have to suppress social media, we are going to lose control. And then you had what's his name, John Kerry saying that what is it? The First Amendment is really makes it hard to govern. It makes it hard for tyranny. But what do you think about what they are worried? It seems to me that the deep state, the globalists, that the demonic weasels are worried. I mean, Hillary Clinton, we are going to lose control. I think that. What do you think about that?
Well, that's the consensus of the aristocracy right now. They feel themselves losing because they can't control the speech of their citizens. And citizens who don't trust them anymore are speaking like people who don't trust them anymore, and they can't tolerate that. They're terrified of it. So they really, really want to institute a new regime of censorship. And, take a couple of social media companies out of the mix, and they're there. If it was just Facebook and YouTube, then we would be full-on censored right now. But instead, we've got X and Telegram and a few other, and Rumble, of course, and a few social media platforms that are still allowing people to tell the truth. And that's just driving those guys crazy. And it really is a consensus. We've got a sitting Supreme Court justice who believes in censorship. We've got all the previous political leaders
that's
saying
Ketanji
stuff like
Jackson,
that.
right?
Yes, that's who that is. And we've got the current candidates for president and vice president saying that, there's no right to free speech if you say something mean, that stuff like that. Like, they don't understand the First Amendment, which was specifically created to protect speech that the government finds offensive. Because there's no reason to protect speech that everybody agrees with and is made happy by. It's the stuff that's at the margins where change takes place. In other words, dissent, that is traditionally censored by dictatorships. And these guys would love to be a dictatorship with censorship powers, and they're actively trying to make that happen. So it's a really dicey time, because we could lose in a heartbeat. I mean, something happens to Elon Musk, and ownership of Twitter shifts into new hands, and then boom, it's over. You and I have no platforms left, because then they'll go after Rumble. And if it's just Rumble, or if it's just Telegram, boy, that's a small entity in a sea of predators. And so we just won't have platforms anymore. We won't be able to say things that the government doesn't like hearing, and that'll be it. And then you got to take it further. Then it becomes kind of a French Revolution thing, where if people can't speak about what they see happening in the world, then they go out into the streets and make things happen. So, censorship, once imposed, might not be sustainable, because we've got an awful lot of people who see the truth now, and a lot of those people are heavily armed. We've been buying guns at record levels for the past 20 years. So it's like we're gearing up for a civil war, and this would be the thing that triggers it.
Democrats are buying guns. Democrats in cities are one of the biggest buyers of guns. I mean, what drove that? That Democrats are they're threatened with what's going on with all this illegal immigration, which they want to tell you, that's fine. You're mean to not let people in.
Well, yeah, kind of what's happening, and this is the weird part of it, because a lot of the minorities that used to be a Democrat stronghold, they were a lock to vote 90% Democrat, are shifting over to the Republicans, because they see themselves being the victims of the new Democrat Party policy, which is to let in tens of millions of people from other countries and then cite those people in swing states, so that and then give them the ability to vote and let them know who gave them all this stuff, so they vote Democrat. And so that creates basically a one-party state. California is always voting Democrat, but now you've got Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania also voting Democrat, and nobody else can win. So the Democrats are playing this game where they're willing to sacrifice the black vote and the Latino vote in order to gain what might be a much bigger vote, which is illegal immigrants, coming in at 2 or 3 million people per year on an open-ended basis. And that's what would happen, I think, if Kamala Harris became president, because they would just leave the border open until we've got 25 or 30 million new voters in the country who know who let them in and who's taking care of them. And that would basically be it for politics as we know it. And yeah, that would be total chaos, because, and it could be that the next stage of the plan is that chaos happens, and then the government uses that as its excuse for declaring martial law and basically just doing away with the whole Constitution, not just the First Amendment. So it could be that it's a longer-term plan, and these are the pieces being put in place right now, with the big thing coming when the pieces that are being put into place now cause chaos. So we'll see. I hope that's not true, but that would explain a lot of the otherwise inexplicable behavior that we're seeing from these guys right now.
And I'll just quote him. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn says we should start calling this what it is, and that's treason. And therefore, if they lose power, there's a lot of people that could go to jail, or treason, the punishment is execution. A lot of people could go to jail, though, for sure, and end up, clawback of all the assets they got with their illegal schemes and what they did with their government jobs, or they could also go to jail, or some could be executed. I mean, these people, I was saying this for a while back, and I just saw some other writing saying it's not a stretch to say they're not only fighting to stay out of jail, they're fighting for their very lives. That's the deep state, that's the evil people. That's why you're seeing Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and Ketanji Jackson Brown talking about, dude, we can't have free speech, right?
Yeah, you could totally make a case for a lot of these guys having committed election fraud and all kinds of other things that would land you in prison. And some of it might rise to the level of treason. So yeah, it's possible that we end up with a Trump administration going after the people who victimized him. They would totally deserve it, and it would totally be fun to watch. Can you imagine, the video of Hillary being led away in handcuffs? I would find that hilarious, but also really scary, because once it becomes the normal tradition in the U.S. for a new government to come in and clean house of the old government using the judicial system, then it never ends. Then we are a banana republic.
It's already started.
Yeah, I mean, it totally has started.
It started with the Biden administration.
Absolutely.
They put this Tina Peters in jail for 9 years because she uncovered election fraud in the state of Colorado, and she got convicted, and 9 years?
Yeah, see, that's why it's so dangerous, because they have weaponized the criminal justice system. They're using it against their opponents, but that's just a one-off. See, we have a choice of, having power change hands, and then the new guys rightfully prosecute all the crimes that were committed last time around, or we could have the government stand back and say, listen, we're going to do this without a legal bloodbath. We're going to fix things, but we're going to do it without setting a precedent that it's okay to tell the Justice Department to go after political candidates who are running against you. That is not okay under any circumstance, and we're going to rise above this, and we're going to do that. And then you're talking, statesmen that maybe saves America as we used to know it, that's asking a lot of the people who were victimized by the current system. So I don't know if that's how it happens at all.
I think Bannon goes to jail because he had protection, for his presidential immunity. He had protection with his conversation with the president. All these other people have gone to jail. This is unbelievable. I mean, this is. I've never seen this in all the time I've been alive.
Yeah, it goes from there all the way out to the censorship that costs people a ton of money. Like, who knows what you would be raking in right now if you were still on YouTube, but instead you got censored, and you're doing great and everything. You built this little empire over in Rumble, which I'm really impressed with, but you could probably make the case of specific losses that resulted from unconstitutional censorship. And there's 10 million people who could say the same thing out there. So this could be the kind of class action lawsuit that bankrupts the aristocracy right now. It could be something that's truly amazing to see. And that could happen outside the realm of the Justice Department. It could be just a bunch of tort lawyers gathering up millions of people who were censored on YouTube and Facebook in a way that is ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and wanting restitution, and that could be a big part of the next decade too. So we'll see. I don't know. I want us to go back to being the way we were. And I don't know what the simplest way for that to be.
That would be the simplest way to be exporting a lot of crazy Democrats that, dress up as a woman, and a man dress up as a woman, and then you're supposed to believe that he's a woman too. So that's just unbelievable. It's like, I did the thing where I'm Thor and I'm Thor. I have a hammer, and my hammer will destroy an M1A1 tank, and you have to believe I'm Thor too. And it's just...
Well, that's already starting to happen. Have you seen what's happening in women's volleyball now? There are college teams who are refusing to play against teams with men on them, and they're showing up, or they're not showing up. They're taking the loss, and it's spreading. And so that's the kind of thing that once it's okay to say that stuff, once you don't lose your college scholarship for saying something like that.
Yeah.
Then everybody feels that way, so it opens up the floodgates to everybody speaking out. All the college athletes, all the women athletes out there are able to say what they think about sharing a locker room with a man and stuff, and so it in a heartbeat the culture changes. So we could have 2 or 3 kind of brush fire things like that, where suddenly it's okay to say what you really believe, and that just cleans everything up. So that would be nice, maybe that'll happen.
I had Alex Newman on, and he was at the meeting in New York at the UN. And with the UN, it's the Pact for the Future, which is really the pact for tyranny for the future. So you don't have any rights. But he said, what they're looking for, he says, you can read this on the UN document, they want polycrises. They want multiple crises. They want the hurricanes. They want the financial problems. They want war. They want political problems. They want everything. They want crises so they can come in and fix it and say, hey, we can make it go away. All you have to do is sell us your soul. Just give us your soul. But do you think we're headed for a multi-crisis a problem right now? I mean, the Fed says, oh, the economy's great. We need to cut interest rates a 0.5 point. Do you think we're headed for some big problems? Let's just start with the economy. That's one of the things you're really good at. You're good at a lot of things, but do you think we're headed for a major blow in the economy?
Well, yeah, the economy's been headed for some kind of a gigantic crisis for decades. You can find videos of me with black hair telling this same story, 15 years ago, because we've been headed that way. And we've kind of turned a corner just lately where we've entered a new phase, which is kind of the blow-off death spiral stage of this whole thing, where we had to raise interest rates to stop inflation, but then that spiked everybody's interest costs and brought on the potential for crises at government levels now, where you can't cover the interest on your government debt anymore without further inflating away your currency. That's going to be a huge financial crisis, and it's in train right now. It could happen pretty much any time, or we could slip into it anytime. And then that takes us to the currency reset that's out there waiting to happen. Now, that kind of thing, currency crises are extremely messy, but you can get through them, and it doesn't even have to be super chaotic. You can just announce a new gold standard on a Sunday night, and then on Monday morning you have a sustainable financial system and go forward. That could happen, but let that happen in concert with a shooting war with Russia, where missiles are taking out nuclear power plants and things like that, which would just collapse the stock market, right? And cause oil prices to spike. And combine that with some kind of a cyber attack, and combine that with some kind of a natural disaster, like 2 big hurricanes that hit Florida and cost $50 billion worth of damage, let all those things happen at the same time. And then maybe a constitutional crisis in politics where an election is clearly stolen and one side refuses to accept the fact that they were cheated out of the presidency, and you start some kind of a civil war-ish thing, or a state just starts rounding up illegal immigrants and dropping them back over the Mexican border, and the federal government says, no, you can't do that. And you got the National Guard of one state versus the National Guard of another state in a shooting war. All of this stuff could happen, and it could all happen in various versions of simultaneity. It could happen sequentially or all at once. And you throw all that into the mix, and you get the kind of chaos where you really do need a dictatorship, and you just have to hope that the people in charge are the good kind. Let's say FDR, even though libertarians aren't crazy about FDR, and he did a lot of things that, in retrospect, probably our kind of president wouldn't have done. But he was a steady hand, and he got through everything. And at the end, we came out in reasonably good shape. That kind of dictatorship would save us. Where you have to declare an emergency, and you basically have to just do what it takes for a while. But that's a rare thing in the world. It's an extremely rare thing in the world. So I wouldn't trust our guys, whoever we have right now, to come in, do what has to be done, clean things up in 2 years, and then go away. That's asking an awful lot out of today's political leaders. So we got to hope that doesn't happen. It could be that it's part of a plan right now, but it's not a guarantee sequence of crises that are coming that we can't avoid. There's still a chance to avoid some of this stuff, and you have to hope. And I know a lot of the audience is going to say, "Oh my God, he's so naive," and I could be, that it could be that so much of this is baked in the cake that there is no fix. But I choose to believe that, chaos is definitely coming, but we get through it. So a decade from now, we're a recognizable version of America. And that's not guaranteed. It might not even be likely at this point, but I think it's completely possible. And I think that's the fight that we are in now for the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever. We got some version of a civil war coming. It might just be political, it might be metaphorical, and might be kinetic, and we don't know. But we have to choose sides. We have to choose the right side, and then we have to make the case in a way that in the end sways enough people so we win. Not easy at this point, because we've allowed ourselves to go so far down the wrong path that chaos is definitely coming, but I hope it's a survivable kind of chaos, and I'm not sure that it will be.
Israel drops, a big daisy cutter on Iran's nuclear facility.
There you go.
What happens?
That could be the thing that sets everything off, because bombing nuclear weapons facilities or nuclear power plants is one of those things that has so many unintended consequences. Iran would have to respond to that in a really serious way, and it's possible that China and Russia feel like they really have to step in on the side of Iran because this has just gone too far, et cetera, and then you get something much bigger. And that's the thing you risk when you start blowing up nuclear anything. So that's possible. And I think the financial markets would respond to that. Oil would go to $150 a barrel. That would crash the stock market. And then you get all the other dominoes falling, commercial real estate, residential real estate, government bonds, derivatives, everything starts blowing up. So that could be the catalyst for a financial crisis that's by far bigger than anything we've lived through, much worse than 2008, 2009, which was the worst thing that we've seen since the Great Depression. So yeah, we're not far from something like that, because you got, I think it was Trump said something like he thinks Israel should bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. And stop me if I'm wrong. And
no, you're right. He said that.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
He said it.
And so you've got Biden, who's a figurehead, a demented figurehead for the neocons who want World War III because they think they can win it. And you've got Trump saying things really recklessly, stuff that we really don't want to happen. There is no good outcome for Israel bombing Iran's nuclear plants. And so we've got to squeak in this really tight little space in the middle where we get through this without some crazy thing like that happening, because on either side are these wide spaces where all kinds of things could happen, and we're kind of, we're tending towards one of those or another, and it's terrifying. So, yeah. Greg, we need to find something optimistic to say here, because this has gone really dark, hasn't it?
Well, I this is just what's happening. Gold at 2,600 took a hit the day we're doing this Tuesday, because I'm going to air this Tuesday. But gold took a pretty big chunk down, and they said, oh, Hezbollah wants to have a peace talks, or not peace talks, I'm sorry, a ceasefire. I don't know if the Israelis are going to do that. They didn't bring them to this point where they can let them regroup and start attacking them all over again. But what's up with gold? I mean, gold is, Martin Armstrong says they're doing it because they're afraid America will default on its debt when we start a big war. But gold is at 2,600, and what Goldman is saying it's going to go to 3,000 or 3,500. Other Goldman Sachs, other projections are much higher. Let's just close with something positive, because a lot of people that see this and read this watch gold. What's going on with gold?
Yeah, because the important thing to understand about all the crazy stuff that we've been talking about so far is that it's basically an investment thesis. You know, there are things that go up in that kind of a world. And it's possible to set up a strategy. Okay, that's a weird thing to have happen, where I just literally couldn't pronounce a common word.
No,
okay,
you got
strategy. It. Yeah. All right. Anyhow, where you set yourself up so that you are poised to at least be protected, you and your family, from what's coming, or alternatively, where you make a ton of money from what's coming because it creates so many opportunities. And gold is at the centerpiece of that kind of process, because that's the kind of money that people have used as money for 3,000 years. It's always held its value through invasions and natural disasters and financial crises. Gold has always been valuable. The people who owned it have always been well off. So you start with something like that. You buy gold and silver, because silver is part of the whole precious metals complex and tends to do well when gold does well. You start by buying gold and silver as the bedrock part of your financial life. And then from there, you branch out into other kinds of real assets that governments can't make more out of on an electronic printing press. And that's energy assets, that's really well chosen things like rental houses. You know, some parts of real estate will do very well in what's coming, and other parts won't. So you need to be very wise about what kind of rental properties you buy. Uranium is going to be probably a very hot place to be. You know, it's going to be something that goes up going forward. Copper, as we electrify the world, there's going to be a huge shortage, and it becomes more valuable. And so there are ETFs you can buy. In other words, mutual funds that trade like stocks, that benefit from all of these things. And so you start, after you've got your physical precious metals, you start branching out into the kinds of financial assets that at least represent physical assets. And with your own life, you start adding skills to make you more resilient. You know, if you can do a little bit of electrical work, stuff like that, learn how to do drywall, learn how to grow your own food in your backyard, learn how to work on cars. There are all kinds of things you can do to make yourself a more useful person to be around, and someone who's more likely to come through a time of disruption in good shape. So, you know, there are lots of things. It goes on, but there are lots of things pointing in the direction of resilience that you can start doing right now. And that's, my Substack is based on that. You know, it's a newsletter that looks for actionable advice along those lines. And there's an awful lot you can do, you know, and as long as you're thinking, all right, if I do this, I'll make a lot of money, or if I do this, I'll be able to help my family, it keeps you in a good mental space. You know, if the world is going crazy, but you are doing things that are going to pay off and allow you to help your friends and family, then you've got a more positive attitude about what's happening, and you can compartmentalize, whereas a lot of people just can't. You know, they're watching the news right now and thinking, they might not be thinking anything. They're just curling up in a ball and whimpering because the world seems so crazy. But you want to get past that. You want to have a positive attitude about the steps you're taking to make your life better. And, you know, it's possible that this stuff pays off in a big way. Big crises in the past have victimized the vast majority of people and made a handful of people who saw those crises coming super rich. So we should be striving to be among that handful of people who makes the right decisions and comes out of this in great shape, you know, and that's not only obviously good advice, but it's a good attitude to have, you know.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to stay updated with more content like this, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss a video.